And welcome to another edition of Travel Leaders Tri-Cities on News Talk 870 KFLD. We've got your host, Sandra Wilson, with us today. And here to kind of steer things through, John McKay. And I think we're going to a place, we're going to actually make history because we're going to be talking about a place that most Americans don't get to go to.
It's true.
And Cuba. Wow.
I know. And it was the most amazing experience. But before we get into that, I just have to say, I want to remind everybody we're doing a special event. It's going to be at Clover Island on March 19th at 6 o'clock. It's an Aussie night, or basically the land down under. We're going to talk on Australia, New Zealand, Fiji, and Tahiti. We have a sales rep coming from a company that we do business with called Travel to the Land Down Under. Ooh. And I really encourage people to call our office, either one, Richland at 783-4645, or I said that wrong. Oh, darn, I do that.
That's okay.
Richland at 943-4686 or Kennewick at 783-4645. But either office to get your name on the list, because we have limited seating and we want to make sure we get you in.
Absolutely.
So that's going to be a fun event. And let me give you some background on Cuba, but let me tell people they have to kind of hang in there. We have a lot of details. And we've decided there's so much to talk about, it's probably going to be two different shows. So you're going to experience Cuba once, and then you get to come back and experience Cuba again. But basically what happened is that Travel Leaders, our national company, and we're a local franchise, gave us a chance at the end of a meeting in Miami to say, okay, fine, I want to continue on to Cuba. It was by invitation only through our tour company, Globus, and their family of brands. And we've had Globus on this show before, and we'll have them again. But they gave us a chance. They have one of the very few contracts with the Cuban government to take people into Cuba on a people-to-people exchange. And that is the key phrase, people-to-people exchange. That lets you experience Cuba, interface with the people, learn about the history and the culture. Blew my mind. And because it's a people-to-people exchange, it's blessed by the United States government, and you can go directly from the United States into Havana.
See, we need to let you know, folks, this isn't something that you can call a travel company and say, I want to take the family to Cuba for Christmas. It doesn't happen that way.
No, it doesn't work that way yet. And I'm going to talk about that a lot. But there are illegal ways to get into Cuba and legal ways to get into Cuba. And frankly, I'm going to go the legal way. So we were invited by Globus family of brands to experience a people-to-people exchange. It took a little advanced planning. This isn't an overnight deal. And yes, when I get into my talk, you'll find out that meeting Americans on the streets on the part of the Cuban people was a little bit, but anyway, here we go. You do have to have a passport. And Globus handled our visa. The visa comes in two parts, and it's perforated down the middle. When you get into Cuba, they take one part, and then you have to hold the second part. And if you lose it, you're in trouble because you needed to get out of the country.
Oh, my.
Sort of the way that Mexico was for quite a long time. You're going to need to fill out some medical forms saying you're healthy and not bringing in any communicable diseases. And we met with our two Globus escorts at our hotel in Miami and filled out all the paperwork before we went to the airport, which was a very smart thing to do because there is a lot of paperwork. We flew over, believe it or not, on Sun Country Airlines, and they are a charter with Cuba Travel Service. Cuba Travel Service did a wonderful job, but they are an arm of the Cuban government. I mean, you know, as was more information regarding interfacing with the Cuban government. Very amazing, probably not a surprise that a lot of people in Miami have ties to Cuba. And they're kind of like the lifeline to the Cuban people in many ways. So when we checked in at the airport in Miami, giant packages wrapped in plastic wrap were going to go onto these airplanes.
Wow.
We, however, were limited to 44 pounds of luggage, including our carry-on. So I don't understand really the smoke and mirrors behind how they took giant pallets of stuff onto that plane and I got 44 pounds. I decided to not ask them. But here we go, 45-minute flight and 1,000,000 miles away.
Wow.
So we got on the plane in Miami. We got our seats. The plane, of course, was a charter, so it was delayed, and then it was delayed. But we got on, and it was fine. And then we landed in Havana. Now, let me digress and tell you that because this was a group of travel leaders, people going, there were 44 people in our group. Most of us were staid travelers who had pretty much done everything in the world, and you couldn't impress us, and, but everybody was blown away about the opportunity to go visit Cuba, and no one had ever been there before.
Yeah.
So that in itself was just pretty amazing. Our group of 44 had 2 escorts from Globus because we were going to have 2 buses. And then we would pick up more people to escort our group when we got there. So we arrived in Havana, and the first thing I noticed was no jetways. I mean, we don't even think about that anymore, but they took the roller stairway up to the plane. We got off and we went in. And if anybody had been to the old airport in Cabo, that was the Miami airport. It was pretty sterile, very clean. No bells and whistles, nothing fancy. There was a restroom there. You needed to pay a quarter to use it, and they would hand you some toilet paper.
My.
So, long lines. And when we got to the front, we handed them our passport, our visa, and our paperwork, and they ripped our visa in half. And then, very surprisingly, there was like a little electric eye camera like they have at the DMV, and they took our picture. And when we got ready to depart, I noticed that the picture they took when we went in had to match the photo when we went out. So that was kind of interesting to me.
I'll say.
Long lines. So now we're in, the guy wishes me a wonderful day, pushes a button, the door opens, and I'm now in baggage claim. And the luggage came out very quickly. That was a no-brainer. And now I'm going to talk to you about what happens with money in Cuba.
Well, that'll be interesting.
Well, that was amazing. First of all, there's two kinds of currency in Cuba. There's one for tourists and one for regular folk. And they're called kooks. I tried to figure out how to spell that. I decided it was like C-O-O-C-K, kooks. But the abbreviation is CUC.
Oh.
And CUC, I'm not even sure what it stands for, but that is the name of the Cuban currency. And the exchange rate on that is pretty much $1 to a kook. However, because we have no exchange rates with Cuba, they're not on our preferred list because of the embargo, which I will get into in great detail as we go through here. We have no currency exchange with Cuba. Kooks are only good in Cuba. You really have zero value if you try to take them out unless you want to use them as a souvenir. But here's the really fun part. There is a $13 fee to exchange kooks from American dollars. There is no exchange fee for Canadian dollars. There is no exchange fee for euros, just for American dollars. So for $100, you get back 87 kooks. And in addition to that, they will not take any American plastic at all.
Wow.
Because they have no way to collect from American banks. So there is no debit cards, no credit cards of any kind, and it's all on a cash basis for Americans when they're in Cuba. The exchange can be done pretty much anywhere. The exchange rate does not vary. You can have it done in the airport. You can go to your hotel, anywhere you want to go, and you will get your money exchanged, and you will get $87 back for $100. So I thought that was pretty fascinating. So we were very much the odd commodity being in Cuba. People were amazingly lovely to us. They don't see Americans very often.
Mm-hmm.
They were thrilled we were there, to be honest, and I kind of was surprised at that. Everywhere we went, they were nice. There was a guy on the plane from Miami to Havana, and I traveled with my girlfriend who does not know the words pack light. So she had on, every airline's worst nightmare of a roller bag to put into her overhead.
Oh, my.
And this guy just stood up and a little old guy, not a young strapping dude. He goes, "Well, can I help you with your bag?" And she's just rolling over playing dead because this guy's going to help her with her suitcase. And nothing precipitated this man asking her. He was just kind.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, the legal entry and the illegal entry, what does that mean? Well, as I just mentioned, Globus had a contract with the United States government to provide people-to-people exchange, but I have to say there were absolutely no restrictions to our movements. People loved talking to us. We did not discuss politics. We just talked about life in Cuba. We did not talk about history. I shouldn't say we didn't talk about the embargo because I'll get to that. We kind of did a little bit. But it was all about meeting the people from Cuba, their kindness, their smile, their generosity. And we could go anywhere we wanted to go, and we could do anything we wanted to do. We had total freedom in Cuba, except, of course, we had a set itinerary, which I will go through. But as far as what you could take back to the United States, I'm very sad to report no cigars, no rum, no coffee.
Oh.
So all the things that people are out there salivating over because they want them.
Cuban cigars.
Cuban cigars, you can smoke them while you're there, but you can't take them out. So it was a very busy trip. This trip was not designed for people that wanted to just hang out in Cuba on a beautiful beach, and they totally had them. This was a trip designed to go interface in Cuba, learn a lot about the country, and I was blown away with my experience there, which is, I guess, why I'm spending 2 shows talking about it. But it was absolutely a wow. And we were in a group of travel agency owners and some executives from Travel Leaders by invitation only. All of the travel agency owners were owners of large Travel Leaders locations. I already told you we were divided up into 2 buses and that we had an escort from Globus. But when we landed in Havana, we had an escort from Havana Tours, the biggest tour company in Havana, and also connected with the Cuban government. Our guide's name was Walkis. I had a little bit of trouble with that. Walkis. He was local. He spoke perfect English. And I love the fact that he was always honest with us. He never sugarcoated an answer. He always gave us the straight, skinny. And he was a wonderful man. And when we come back after our break, I'm going to continue on my journey of a lifetime through Cuba.
Right here on News Talk 870.